pantheon, associated with earth. Adityas. Vedic pantheon, associated with Sunday Adonis. Phoenician Syrian pantheon, associated with resurrection. Adrast. Brittian pantheon, associated with war. Adrastia. Trojan Phrygian pantheon, associated with righteousness. Adro. Lugbara pantheon, associated with creation. Aegir. Norse pantheon, associated with sea. Aeneas. Greek pantheon, associated with piety. Aesculapius. Roman pantheon, associated with healing. Isma Diva. Parsi pantheon, associated with lust and anger. Eternitas. Roman pantheon, associated with eternity. Afi. Caucasus pantheon, associated with rain, thunderstorms. Argas. Iranian pantheon, associated with illness. Agatgos daimon. Greek pantheon, associated with good genius. Agdistis. Fijian pantheon. Aglibol. Palmyra pantheon, associated with moon. Agni. Vedic pantheon, associated with fire. Agnostos Theos. Greek pantheon. Agwu. Igbo pantheon, associated with health. Agwu. Igbo pantheon, associated with health. Arbolam Tsarkab. Mayan pantheon, Agwu, associated with agriculture. Ahon. Indians pantheon, associated with supreme being. Ahriman. Persian pantheon, associated with anti-creation. Ahura Mazda. Zarathustra pantheon, associated with light. Ahurani. Iranian pantheon, associated with water. Ari Tojan. Yakuts pantheon, associated with light. Iakos. Greek pantheon, associated with judgment. Alos. Greek pantheon, associated with wind. Aeon. Greek pantheon, associated with time. Aryaman. Vedic pantheon, associated with social bond. Aitu. Samoa pantheon. Aitvaras. Lithuanian pantheon, associated with evil. Aius Locutus. Roman pantheon, associated with speaker. Akasagarbha. Buddhist pantheon, associated with knowledge. Aka. Egyptian pantheon, associated with earth. Akabelts. Basque pantheon, associated with farmsteading. Amaterasu. Shinto pantheon, associated with Sunday AMMA. Norse pantheon, associated with churls. Amun. Kemetic pantheon, associated with creation. Amun. Kemetic pantheon, associated with creation. Amunit. Kemetic pantheon, associated with hiddenness. Amunit. Kemetic pantheon, associated with hiddenness. Anansi. West Africa pantheon, associated with tea and Drimni. Norse pantheon, associated with cooking. Anjati of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Bhutto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anjati of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Andrast Kasha. Icenic pantheon, associated with war. Andvari. Norse pantheon, associated with gold. Angroda. Norse pantheon, associated with evil. Angru Mainyu. Persian pantheon, associated with evil. Anhur of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Bhutto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anhur of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anti of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Anubis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis great of magic. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis he of the sacred bark. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis lord of the horizon. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis lord of the two lands. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis of the east. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis of the north. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis of the south. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis of the west. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis who hears prayers. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Anubis who opens the ways. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Apit of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apit of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Argus. Greek pantheon, associated with watchfulness. Asgard. Norse pantheon, associated with Asgardian. Ash of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Ash of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Astrild. Norse pantheon, associated with love. Or Dumbler. Norse pantheon, associated with ice cream. Or Vandil. Norse pantheon. Baalbek. Greek pantheon, associated with Jupiter, Venus, Bacchus. Balder. Norse pantheon, associated with light beauty. Balder. Norse pantheon, associated with light. Banebt Jedit of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banebt Jedit of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Banshee. Gaelic pantheon. Bat of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bat of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Bordi Hilly. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Biz. Kemetic pantheon, associated with protection. Biz. Kemetic pantheon, associated with protection. Bestla. Norse pantheon, associated with ice. Bela. Norse pantheon, associated with barley. Bifrost. The Rainbow Bridge. Norse pantheon. Jort. Norse pantheon, associated with light. Blid. Norse pantheon. Boar. Norse pantheon, associated with ice. Bragi. Norse pantheon, associated with poetry skaldship. Brynhild. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Buri. Norse pantheon, associated with creation. Bigvir. Norse pantheon, associated with barley. Bilgia. Norse pantheon. Cecrops. Greek pantheon, associated with civilization. Centaur. Greek pantheon, associated with passion, violence. Sensenhuitznahua. Aztec pantheon, associated with southern stars. Sentsonmimixcoa. Aztec pantheon, associated with northern star. Cerberus. Greek pantheon, associated with Hades. Calciutlicu. Aztec pantheon, associated with water, rivers, seas, storms, baptism. Krolksorqui. Aztec pantheon, associated with magic. Darbog. Slavic pantheon, associated with Sunday Dafn. Norse pantheon, associated with undertow. Duduan of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Duduan of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Dellinger. Norse pantheon, associated with dawn. Dis Norse pantheon, associated with midwinter ritual of drinking and storytelling. Dragon. Greek Japanese Chinese pantheon. Dryad. Greek Roman Northern Europe pantheon, associated with forest. Duamutef. Kemetic pantheon, associated with canopic protection. Duamutef. Kemetic pantheon, associated with canopic protection. Echiona. Greek pantheon. Ehecatl. Aztec pantheon, associated with wind. Einmiria. Norse pantheon, associated with deception evil. Eir. Norse pantheon, associated with healing. Isa. Norse pantheon, associated with glut, deception. Eli. Norse pantheon, associated with old age. Elves. Norse pantheon, associated with beauty. Empus. Greek pantheon, associated with nightmare seduction. Eastrae. Saxon pantheon, associated with fertility, spring. Erymanthian boar. Greek pantheon, associated with havoc. Ishu. Yoruba pantheon, associated with crossroads. Fairy. Brittian Norse pantheon, associated with light. Fenrir. Norse pantheon, associated with wolf monster. Forseti. Norse pantheon, associated with justice, order. Forseti. Norse pantheon, associated with justice, order. Freya. Norse pantheon, associated with love, sexual desire, fertility. Freya. Norse pantheon, associated with sun, rain, harvest. Frigg. Norse pantheon, associated with marriage, motherhood. Frost giants. Norse pantheon, associated with chaos. Fulla. Norse pantheon, associated with chastity. Fuxi. Chinese pantheon, associated with civilization. Gargoyle. European pantheon. Garm. Norse pantheon, associated with hell. Jeb. Kemetic pantheon, associated with earth. Jeb. Kemetic pantheon, associated with earth. Gephian. Norse pantheon, associated with plants' fertility. Gairad. Norse pantheon, associated with ice. Gaia Skokul. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Gerd. Norse pantheon, associated with sex fertility. Jasimi. Norse pantheon. Geryon. Greek pantheon, associated with fraud. Giants. Greek pantheon. Ginnungagap. Norse pantheon, associated with Gorzai. Gijalp. Norse pantheon. Gladsheim. Norse pantheon, associated with Gorzai. Gleti. Fon pantheon, associated with moon. Glut. Norse pantheon, associated with gluttony. Gol. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Gondel. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Grape. Norse pantheon, associated with Gorzai. Happy. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Nile flooding. Happy. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Nile flooding. Atha Great of magic. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Athahi of the sacred bark. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Atha Lord of the horizon. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Atha Lord of the two lands. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Athi of the east. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Athi of the north. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Athi of the south. Kemetic pantheon, associated with love. Athi of the west. Hatti. Norse pantheon, associated with Ragnarok. Horhet. Kemetic pantheon, associated with infinity. Horhet. Kemetic pantheon, associated with infinity. Horun of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Bhutto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Horun of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Hecate. Greek pantheon, associated with crossroads. Hare. Kemetic pantheon, associated with infinity. Hare. Kemetic pantheon, associated with infinity. Heimdall. Norse pantheon, associated with watchfulness. Heka. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Heka. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Hela. Norse pantheon, associated with hell. Helheim. Norse pantheon, associated with death. Herfjotu. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Hermes. Greek pantheon, associated with communication. Hermoth. Norse pantheon, associated with speed. Hertha. Norse pantheon, associated with cow. Herishaf of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Herishaf of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Hild. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Hladgunna. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Lin. Norse pantheon, associated with consolation. Lok. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Nos. Norse pantheon, associated with sensuality infatuation. Hod. Norse pantheon, associated with darkness winter. Holly. Norse pantheon, associated with Trinity. Holla. Norse pantheon, associated with death, disease, devastation. Honir. Norse pantheon, associated with indecision and avoidane. Horus great of magic. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus he of the sacred bark. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus lord of the horizon. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus lord of the two lands. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus of the east. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus of the north. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus of the south. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus of the west. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus who hears prayers. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Horus who opens the ways. Kemetic pantheon, associated with kingship. Reisvelg. Norse pantheon, associated with evil. Prist. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Hrungnir. Norse pantheon, associated with drink. Hrym. Norse pantheon, associated with Ragnarok. Huiracocha. Inca pantheon, associated with creation. Huitzilopochtli. Aztec pantheon, associated with Sunday Huitzilopochtli. Aztec pantheon, associated with war, sun, human sacrifice. Huixtocihuatl. Aztec pantheon, associated with salt and salt water. Huldra. Norse pantheon, associated with woodlands. Hildamur. Norse pantheon, associated with woodlands. Hymir. Norse pantheon, associated with drink. Hyndla. Norse pantheon. Hyrrokin. Norse pantheon, associated with winter storms. Idun. Norse pantheon, associated with immortality. Imsati. Kemetic pantheon, associated with canopic protection. Imsati. Kemetic pantheon, associated with canopic protection. Inti. Inca pantheon, associated with Sunday IPOs. Christian pantheon, associated with foresight. Isis great of magic. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis he of the sacred bark. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis lord of the horizon. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis lord of the two lands. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis of the east. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis of the north. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis of the south. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis of the west. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis who hears prayers. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Isis who opens the ways. Kemetic pantheon, associated with magic. Itzpapalotl. Jafnia. Norse pantheon, associated with mysterious three. Janus. Roman pantheon, associated with thresholds. Jan Saxa. Norse pantheon. Jeralul. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Jengu. Igbo pantheon, associated with good fortune. Jola. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Jord. Norse pantheon, associated with wilderness, primitive earth. Jormungand. Norse pantheon, associated with evil. Jotunheim. Norse pantheon, associated with giants. Judah. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Jupiter. Roman Indo-Germanic pantheon, associated with skylight. Kara. Norse pantheon, associated with Valkyrie. Korkit. Kemetic pantheon, associated with darkness. Korkit. Kemetic pantheon, associated with darkness. Kirti of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Bhutto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kirti of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Knum. Kemetic pantheon, associated with creation. Knum. Kemetic pantheon, associated with creation. Kuk. Kemetic pantheon, associated with darkness. Kuk. Kemetic pantheon, associated with darkness. Kvesa. Norse pantheon, associated with inspiration, knowledge, beet juice. Lady of the West. Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Laga. Norse pantheon, associated with springs and wells. Laufey. Norse pantheon, associated with evil. Legba. Vodun pantheon, associated with crossroads. Lif. Norse pantheon, associated with birth of mankind. Lifthrisir. Norse pantheon, associated with birth of mankind. Lofn. Norse pantheon, associated with adultery, forbidden love. Loki. Norse pantheon, associated with deception, evil. Lord of the West. Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Maat. Kemetic pantheon, associated with order. Mafdet of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Bhutto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mafdet of Thebes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Magni, Norse pantheon, associated with strength. Mani, Norse pantheon, associated with moon. Martanda, Vedic pantheon, associated with mankind. Mawu, Dorome pantheon, associated with moon. Majd of Abydos, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Bhutto, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Dendera, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Edfu, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Elephantine, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Heliopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Hermopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Memphis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Mendes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Majd of Thebes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Mayhen, Kemetic pantheon, associated with protection. Mayhen, Kemetic pantheon, associated with protection. Metztli, Aztec pantheon, associated with moon, night, farmers. Minute of Abydos, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Bhutto, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Dendera, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Edfu, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Elephantine, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Heliopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Hermopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Memphis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Mendes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Minute of Thebes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Montu Great of Magic, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu He of the Sacred Bark, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu Lord of the Horizon, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu Lord of the Two Lands, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu of the East, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu of the North, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu of the South, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu of the West, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu who hears prayers, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Montu who opens the ways, Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Noga, Indian pantheon, associated with eternity. Najana, Mesopotamian pantheon, associated with sex beauty. Nornit, Kemetic pantheon, associated with waters. Nornit, Kemetic pantheon, associated with waters. Nemti of Abydos, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Bhutto, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Dendera, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Edfu, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Elephantine, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Heliopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Hermopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Memphis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Mendes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nemti of Thebes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Nephthys, Kemetic pantheon, associated with protection. Nephthys, Kemetic pantheon, associated with protection. Nun, Kemetic pantheon, associated with chaos waters. Nun, Kemetic pantheon, associated with chaos waters. Nut, Kemetic pantheon, associated with sky. Nut, Kemetic pantheon, associated with sky. Nuwa, Chinese pantheon, associated with creation. Odin, Norse pantheon, associated with creation. Algan, Yoruba pantheon, associated with iron. Onuris of Abydos, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Buto, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Dendera, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Edfu, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Elephantine, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Heliopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Hermopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Memphis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Mendes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Onuris of Thebes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Apoctli, Aztec pantheon, associated with hunting and fishing. Ozanian, Yoruba pantheon, associated with herbalism. Osiris Great of Magic, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris He of the Sacred Bark, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris Lord of the Horizon, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris Lord of the Two Lands, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris of the East, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris of the North, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris of the South, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris of the West, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris who hears prayers, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Osiris who opens the ways, Kemetic pantheon, associated with afterlife. Pachamama, Andean pantheon, associated with earth. Packet of Abydos, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Buto, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Dendera, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Edfu, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Elephantine, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Heliopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Hermopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Memphis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Mendes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Packet of Thebes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Parta, Kemetic pantheon, associated with creation. Kadesh of Abydos, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Buto, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Dendera, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Edfu, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Elephantine, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Heliopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Hermopolis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Memphis, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Mendes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kadesh of Thebes, Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Kabesanuf, Kemetic pantheon, associated with canopic protection. Kabesanuf, Kemetic pantheon, associated with canopic protection. Quetzalcoatl, Aztec pantheon. Ra Great of Magic, Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra He of the Sacred Bark. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra Lord of the Horizon. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra Lord of the Two Lands. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra of the East. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra of the North. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra of the south. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra of the west. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra who hears prayers. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ra who opens the ways. Kemetic pantheon, associated with Sunday Ragnarok. Norse pantheon, associated with Gorz i.e. Reshef of Abydos. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Buto. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Dendera. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Edfu. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Elephantine. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Heliopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Hermopolis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Memphis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Reshef of Mendes. Kemetic pantheon, associated with local cult. Partar. Kemetic pantheon, associated with creation. Ma'at. Kemetic pantheon, associated with order. Thoth. Kemetic pantheon, associated with wisdom. Anubis. Kemetic pantheon, associated with funerary rites. Sekhmet. Kemetic pantheon, associated with war. Hermes. Greek pantheon, associated with communication. Hecate. Greek pantheon, associated with crossroads. Janus. Roman pantheon, associated with thresholds. Vesta. Roman pantheon, associated with hearth. Ishu. Yoruba pantheon, associated with crossroads. Legba. Vodun pantheon, associated with crossroads. Augan. Yoruba pantheon, associated with iron. Inti. Inca pantheon, associated with Sunday Pachamama. Andean pantheon, associated with earth. Nua. Chinese pantheon, associated with creation. Fuxi. Chinese pantheon, associated with civilization. Heimdall. Norse pantheon, associated with watchfulness. Balder. Norse pantheon, associated with light. Amaterasu. Shinto pantheon, associated with Sunday Susanoo. Shinto pantheon, associated with storms. March 1927. United States. The King of Kings is released. An early cinematic depiction of Jesus establishes biblical epic as mass myth. June 1938. United States. Technology. A Mesopotamian pantheon. Kemetic. Associated with civilization. Heimdall. Norse pantheon, associated with watchfulness. Balder. Norse pantheon, associated with